Hey, all right. Welcome everybody to online workshop number 7. I think we are at. We have 2 left. So these are in our My Life, My Body series. We've been running a set of online workshops over the last 7 months with the goal of mostly supporting people to understand the umbrella of sexuality a little bit better. We tend to kind of freak out sometimes and react and only hear the word sex in the word sexuality, and sexuality is much, much broader than that. If you missed workshop number 1, I highly recommend checking it out, and in fact, they're all online on our website, hsyukon.com. I am Sophia Fortin. I'm your facilitator today. I'm the sexual health facilitator at the Yukon Association for Community Living, and we are a community inclusion organization. We run all kinds of recreation opportunities. We advocate for folks with disabilities, and we're all about creating inclusion. And the My Life, My Body program is a healthy sexuality and healthy relationships program under the YACL banner. And so our goal with that is to support families, staff, and individuals with addressing sexuality issues, whether that be the issue of friendship, like we're talking about today, or relationships in our lives, or whether it be puberty, transitioning through puberty, or whether it be learning about sex and being prepared for doing abuse and violence prevention. So there's kind of a whole umbrella of things that we've been working towards. And today we're going to be focusing on really 2 key pieces of our model of human sexuality, which are intimacy and sensuality. So if we think back to our model of human sexuality, there's many, many aspects to the sexual self and to the self, really. And our need for intimacy, and by that I just mean our need for connected human relationships, is really hardwired. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. All humans are hardwired for connection. And when we go out looking for intimacy in inappropriate ways, we can harm ourselves and harm others. And when we have the skills and the opportunities to create intimacy in our lives, create positive relationships in our lives, there are amazing effects in terms of our health, our mental health, our well-being, all that fun stuff. And sensuality is really just about touch. So today, kind of in a nutshell, we're talking about intimacy, and that's the idea of being seen, heard, and loved just for who we are by many different people in the world, depending on the kinds of relationships we have with them. And our ability to get the touch that we need, whether that's hugs, high fives, both of those pieces relate to human connection. What we're going to be talking about today, why friendship matters, and we'll be going over Dave Hingsberger's The 10 Skills of Likability, as well as talking a little bit about our role, more so from the staff and support worker side of things, but also a little bit in terms of family as well. Pop your questions in the chat at any time, or you can send me an email, sophia@ycommunityliving.com, if you've got something you'd like to ask anonymously. And without further ado, we will dive in. Hold on, I doubled my thing here. All right, so all humans are hardwired for connection. Our bodies literally, like biologically crave it. And they crave it emotionally. So on a biological level, we all have a need to be touched. We know that little babies die if they don't get enough touch, if they don't get enough love. And we know that kind of on like a soul level and an emotional level, we are, it's fundamental to our happiness to be seen and recognized and loved for who we are by the people in our lives. And this doesn't have to be intimate relationships. So we often equate intimacy with intimate relationships. But when I talk about intimacy, I just talk about like those moments we have where we feel seen and heard by others. Those moments we have where we feel appreciated for who we are, our quirks, our little interests, what we love, and what we bring to social situations, right? We are hardwired to be social animals, to live in family groups, to be caring for others, and to be cared for. And it's fundamentally important to our health and well-being to have a strong social network. And I don't know if you've been noticing this in the news lately. It might be because I've been researching it lately, but I have seen a ton of articles and newscasts and all kinds of things really talking about the loneliness epidemic. We're all on our technology so much more, and we're not connecting in kind of those face-to-face ways. And as a result, people are feeling really isolated and really lonely. And what we know from the science is that close relationships are one of the biggest predictors of human happiness, so just overall health and well-being. We know that friendships and having a high number of social interactions in a day is basically the second biggest predictor for living a long life. So when we look at all the different things that can contribute to us being a centenarian or whatever it's called, living 100 years, not smoking, eating well, those kinds of things, all really important. But number 2 on the list, and kind of funny, I can't remember number 1. Number 2 on the list is having close social ties, but also a high number of social interactions every day. And what that means really is about acquaintanceships, and it's about how well accepted we are by society. When we're out doing our day-to-day, are we having a little chit-chat with the lady at Shoppers Drug Mart? Are people on the street waving at us and saying hi? Are we getting a level of interaction where we're feeling accepted, seen, by the society? And that is the number 2 predictor for how long a person lives, which is pretty crazy. Close friendships can reduce the risk of early death by about 50%. And another way of putting it is that a lack of human connection can have the same impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I don't know how it's in a pack. It's probably like 2 packs a day. So living alone, living in isolation, not having opportunities for healthy touch, and not having opportunities to socially interact with the world has a really big impact on us. And I always put this in context for folks, and you may have kind of heard me say this before, where I ask the question, how many stars are in your sky? And I always tell this story. It's one of Dave Hingsberger's from one of his books that he shared, where he was doing an annual, learning plan review with the client and the client's mother. And the goal was working towards independent living for this individual. And they were looking through the goals that they had had for the year, and this was great. She was tying her shoes independently, and she was washing her dishes, and making it to the bus and to wherever she was going in the day independently. And so she was hitting all these milestones and doing a really great job. But the mother was feeling a little bit, nervous, or, obviously had something to share, something to say. And when Dave asked her, the mother just said she had realized at one point as they were working through all these goals that as an individual, she, the mother, basically had a very full night sky with all kinds of constellations and groups and individual stars. She had a whole world of people that she could go to when she was having a tough day, if she needed support on something, if she needed advice, if she wanted to have fun. She had a whole world of people to reach out to and to connect to. And when she thought about her daughter's life, she realized that she was one of the few stars in that sky for her daughter. And that really scared her. And certainly when I've spoken with many frontline staff, when I ask people, how many stars are in your sky? And then I want you to think, how many stars are in the sky of the people that you work with? And then if you take away any stars that are actually paid to be there, how many stars are left? How brightly do they shine? How regularly does your client, does your family member get to interact with those stars? And the number can get pretty small. It can get pretty small. Folks definitely start with a fairly small network to begin with. And if we take away the paid interactions that are there, the support interactions, it can become even smaller. And this is definitely a reality for folks with intellectual disabilities. Not all, but many. So what we know from the research there is that over 50% of people with intellectual disabilities report loneliness and isolation, compared to only 15 to 30% of the general population. So, at minimum, a 20% increase or higher incidence of loneliness and isolation. We know that a third of people with intellectual disability have had no contact with friends in over a year. So even if folks have friends, they may not have many opportunities to connect with those friends. And that's certainly something that we see here at YCL. We regularly poll and interview the folks that are coming to the Just for Fun dance, for example. And something that we've learned over the years is that folks may have really strong friendships, but the dance is the one chance a month they ever get to actually connect with some of those folks. I work with a couple of other clients, and the guys, they see each other at work now that they work together, and they see each other at Special O. And that's, fairly frequent, all things considered. But they don't often have opportunities to just go out and hang out together, go to the movies, take a workshop, do all kinds of things that would just be them sort of hanging out and doing what they love to do. So even though folks might have friends, having the opportunity to connect with those friends on a regular basis can be really challenging. And the other thing we know, and this is a reality for every human on the planet, is that loneliness and isolation are risk factors for increased depression, anxiety, lower literacy rates, and increased health challenges, including early death, but really just like poorer health outcomes in general. And what this all relates back to, and it's not separate from any of the other challenges that we're always working through, is that folks with intellectual disabilities, have a disadvantage in the sense that cognitively many of the struggles that they have are limits to friendship making. So when we have struggles with perspective taking, when we have struggles communicating even, right, verbally or in ways that are considered kind of the norm, when we live in a bit of a different world and reality, it can be hard to connect with other folks, whether they have a disability or don't. And then on top of that, we definitely know that there is, stigma and judgment associated with having a disability that can make it challenging for folks to make friends, but also just make it challenging for them to feel accepted in the world. And I think that's really kind of what's at the heart of this. The other piece that I want to mention here, which I don't have a separate slide for, is that a lot of the stuff that I see around sexuality that's, what we would call unexpected behavior or unacceptable behavior or inappropriate behavior really comes from the idea that the drive for connection is so base, it's the same as looking for food, right? It is so base. We all need it at this root level. And what can happen is, it's like hunger, right? If I'm hungry and I have limited options for getting food, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get food in my body, whether it's socially acceptable or not, and maybe even whether it harms other people or not, right? I might steal, I might dumpster dive, I might borrow, beg and steal, there are many different strategies for getting food, for filling that need. Some of them are more socially acceptable than others for a variety of reasons. And if I'm pushed into a corner where I don't have access to these more acceptable tools, I'm going to use these other tools because I need to eat. So looking for intimacy, looking for touch, looking for connection is kind of the same. And if people have not been taught the appropriate channels, the appropriate skills to seek that out, they will find whatever mechanisms they can to get that, because it's so base and so desired, so needed, really, so fundamental. And so often when we start to talk about the types of sexuality issues that we see in the workplace, like inappropriate crushes on staff, or people just like flirting with everybody or hitting on everyone, or not understanding social boundaries, not understanding those limits, and doing kind of weird or strange things to get attention, to get connection, we have to remember that this is because a person is just using whatever is in their arsenal, in their toolkit, to fill that intimacy need, if they haven't been taught kind of the appropriate ways to go about it. So I guess what I'm saying here really is that loneliness and isolation are so huge in our community, and there really can be they can be sort of a root cause for many of the types of behaviors that we see, especially when we start talking about sexually inappropriate behavior and boundary breaking behavior. And when we bear that in mind, that a person is not deliberately breaking boundaries, they are just seeking connection the best way that they know how, we can understand their behaviors a little bit differently and understand how to kind of address those behaviors and move forward with them. So that's what I kind of want to say about that. Setting the stage for why friendship is so critical. Maybe just give me a note in the chat. Let me know you're still hearing and seeing me okay. Ladies, that would be wonderful. And we will move on to the next piece here. So there's two kind of fundamental pieces to friendship. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the second one today than the first. But folks need opportunity to build friendships. So they need to get out of the house. They need to have jobs. They need to have places and spaces that they can go to meet people and connect with them. But that is not enough. So creating opportunities for folks is great. But if they don't have a fundamental set of skills for friendship building, then all the opportunities in the world are not going to get them anywhere. Or what we're going to see, and which is really common, is kind of like really short-term friendships, right? Where people form a friendship and then it crashes and burns because they don't necessarily have the skills to keep it going. And I mean, in many ways, the skills that we're talking about today are skills that all humans need to learn. All humans don't master very well. And they're skills for healthy relationships, period. So they're skills for healthy friendships. They're skills for healthy intimate relationships. They're skills for healthy colleagueships, etc. So they're really important. And in many ways, this isn't a disability issue, except to say that, like, these are skills that are teachable. They're not inherent, right? And most of us sort of get opportunities to try and fail and learn from our mistakes. And many folks with intellectual disabilities either sort of get buffered from that learning because there's a big fear of rejection and hurt, or there's simply just not the overt teaching of this very as usual, hidden curriculum, right? So folks need opportunity and skills in order to build friendships. Thanks for checking in. If things continue to be a little bit patchy, just let me know and I can always turn the video off, okay? And that will usually help us a little bit. All right, so then what are the skills that we need to teach? The 10 skills of likability. So this is adapted from Dave Hingsberger, who works at Avita Community Living in Ontario. He's got many, many, many great resources on the subject. And this was put together by him and his team. So we're just going to kind of talk about what these 10 skills are, some ideas for teaching each of them. Many of them you'll probably already have included kind of in your ongoing practice. Some you may have not. And also, this is another opportunity I highly recommend, if you haven't already, to take or check out the Ethics of Touch webinar or online workshop that we did. A lot of what we're talking about today is very much related to that, and I just won't have time to kind of get into it as deeply. So definitely check that one out. Again, a reminder, if you've got any questions that are coming up, pop them in the chat and we will address them. So the first skill, and actually pretty much the most important skill of friendship, is reciprocity. And reciprocity is this idea of give and take in friendship. And this can be give and take in conversation. This can be give and take in terms of what we do with each other. This can be give and take in terms of how we negotiate. And it's a big one. It's something that Dave has really seen in his practice. I've seen a bit in mine, is that folks really struggle with that perspective taking piece, right? Seeing, where others are coming from. But also, if they've had an intellectual disability like since birth, their whole world can really end up being about them, right? The family dynamics may center around them. They go to a lot of meetings at school that are especially about them. They're constantly kind of in this like extra focus space because they need the extra focus and the extra help. But as a downside of that, we can kind of train people to really believe that, if it's not about them, then it's not important, and that everything is about them. So reciprocity is really key, and we can sort of inadvertently not teach it or teach people the opposite. So that's really something to kind of pay attention to. And the antidote here, and I know many folks do this already, is to really role model and show and get our clients and our family members involved in giving back. So whether that means volunteer work, whether that means thinking consciously about how they're giving in a friendship. A really big one, and there's lots of cool stuff on the web, is really exploring turn taking in conversation. Dave always tells this story about how, and this goes back to the idea of likability, right? Like, what makes a likable person? And we can all certainly admit it's okay to say that, like, we're happy to work with all the clients that we work with, but some of them we like a little bit more than others, right? So what's the difference there? And Dave had this great story of how he had one particular client that he struggled with in terms of the likability piece. And, he'd asked around in the agency, and a few other people kind of felt the same way, and they figured it out. And it was kind of like the guy would come in for his sessions with Dave, and he would just walk in, talk all about himself for an hour. He never checked in with Dave. He never asked Dave, like, how he was doing. There was never sort of this reciprocity in the exchange. And he kind of had this aha moment one day where he realized, oh, like, maybe no one's ever taught him how to do that. So things like turn taking, things like, the guy came in one day and he just started yabbing, and Dave was like, hold on, I need you to go outside, come back in, and like ask me how I'm doing before we get started. But reciprocity is a huge one. So thinking about how in a day we're role modeling reciprocity, and how we are providing folks with opportunities to be in a giving role. So if they're going to a potluck or something like that, like, how do we work with them to like bring something to contribute? How do we work with them on turn taking in conversation so that there's that give and take, that reciprocity in conversation? How are they volunteering? How are they learning the importance of how nice it feels to make other people feel good and to give back? That's kind of really a huge one. The next one is about trust, and this one is actually more about individuals kind of understanding who is trustworthy in their life. So again, trust is a skill. It's not a kind of an inherent thing, and it's something that we need to learn and practice. And one thing that we definitely see with folks with intellectual disabilities is that there can be a tendency to trust everyone. And that can be as a result of having many, many people in your life taking care of you at different avenues. It could be a result of, the way your brain works. But there's just this innate desire to kind of trust everybody, welcome everybody into their life very quickly. Or on the other side, there can really be a lack of trust as a result of harm done, abuse experienced, shame or lack of inclusion, those kinds of things. So there's sort of a tendency to either trust everybody or trust no one, right? Or trusting no one because, there's just been so many people in and out of your life in a helping position. So working with folks around, I like to create a trust list with people where they think through the different people in their life and who they trust and why they trust them, what trust is. Another important thing is working with folks on, especially when we're in staff situations, we're working within an agency, making sure that we slow down a new staff relationship. So often, someone starts working within an agency and They may be providing intimate care to someone like almost immediately. And so the more we're slowing down relationships so that people are learning that not every single new person in their life is their best friend, and that there is a difference between new staff and staff I've known for like 3 years or 5 years, is really important. And there's more about that in the Ethics of Touch webinar. I also think that it's important to talk about what it means to be trustworthy yourself. What it means to have somebody feel like they can rely on you and that you will support them. So trust is a really big piece of likability as well. And I was watching a really great TED Talk actually about trust the other day. And trust is actually made up of 3 different pieces, one of which is empathy, so our ability to make people feel heard and seen. It's about our logic, so being able to, if we're trying to convince somebody to do something, we want to appear trustworthy. Do we have sound logic according to this person? And it's also about authenticity. And I think that's really worth mentioning here because it's something that folks can really struggle with. Everybody struggles with being authentic and just being their true selves and putting it out there. And when someone has an intellectual disability, part of being authentic in the world means in some ways, like being able to sort of accept your disability as a piece of who you are, not all of who you are, but as a piece of who you are, and being able to just comfortably put it out there and comfortably advocate for yourself. So I talk about this often in the friendship circles, right, where it's like having an ability to advocate for myself and communicate to people about who I am and what I need is a really great way of building trust and building connection. And I think of it in this way, is that when we are in the minority or in a population where things are a little bit different can be scary for folks. And that doesn't mean that that's okay, because it's not. And the onus shouldn't be on all folks with intellectual disabilities to be doing the advocating all the time. The rest of us should just be able to be okay with people who are different. But I certainly have noticed in my own life that when someone is really comfortable with their disability or difference to the point where they can just state it, not as not leave it as the elephant in the room, but just say, hey, sorry, I have this, my leg twitches sometimes, so just don't mind it. That removes the otherness. It removes the difference. It removes the confusion and the nervousness that the other person might be feeling because they're not sure if they should ask or not ask. And it shows a comfort and a confidence and an authenticity which really engenders trust. So that's something that I really like to work on with clients is connecting with their interests and their passions and who they are and all the pieces of who they are. And part of who they are is defined a little bit by their disability. And that might be their habits or what's going on for them. For example, I have a friend who struggles with anxiety, and anxiety is something that's very new to me. I don't really understand it. And sometimes her behavior gets a little strange when you're out with her. And partially it's an invisible disability. So I don't know what's going on. And as soon as she's able to say to me, just going on through some anxiety stuff, like, don't mind me, I might get a little weird, I can just relax and be like, okay, how can I help? Instead of getting confused or angry or wondering what's going on. So trust and authenticity are very hugely related. And that's kind of an interesting angle to sort of think about. All right, continuing on. Thoughtfulness, fairly basic. This is about teaching people that it's really important when we like someone, when we want to be friends with someone, to notice, right? To observe and to show people that we've been noticing and observing. And so what that looks like is remembering to get birthday cards. So helping people put together a birthday calendar for everyone that's important in their life and making sure that they're writing cards. It's about having like a thank you card drawer so that anytime someone does something nice for our client or for this individual, that they return the favor, the thoughtfulness, by writing a thank you card. It's about, one idea I had was, if you're supporting someone through their friendships, making a list of all the things they know about their friend and all the things they know their friend loves so that they can use that list to do thoughtful and caring things like purchase or make a gift that's related to their friend's special interest, or, planning a party that's like all about their friend and what their friend loves most. So thoughtfulness is really important. And again, you'll see a theme here with a lot of these things is when we are working with clients or when we're, living our day-to-day lives with our family members, role modeling these things is really huge, important part of this process, but also consciously teaching it. So are we using social stories to share what thoughtful people and people who demonstrate reciprocity are all about? Are we, narrating out loud if this is a technique that works like when we're being thoughtful? Are we explaining what we're doing? I'm writing a thank you card, for this gift someone bought me because it's thoughtful. And that's something that good friends do. So what are those key messages or, rules, guidelines that we're really trying to instill, and how are we instilling them? Because these are all learned skills. They're not things that we kind of inadvertently pick up. Approachability. Approachability for me is summed into body language understanding and hygiene. So in order to be a likable person, in order to create connections with other people, in order to be a person who, is accepted by others, certainly we need to make sure that our hygiene is taken care of. And one thing that can often happen here is that we sort of dance around bad hygiene because we don't want to hurt our clients, our family members' feelings. So we may notice that they're not showering regularly and not really know how to address it. We may notice plumber's bum, right? So bum cracks showing with pants at work. We may notice, dirty nails or unwashed faces or like those kinds of things. And it can sometimes feel really challenging to speak up or say something. And this is also kind of another theme throughout, is that we're not really doing people any favors with our sympathy or by letting things slide, right? So rejection really hurts, and so does having someone it's not ever fun having someone tell you have something in your teeth, or having someone tell you that you don't smell super great. But those are learning opportunities that are missed. And if people are missing out on friendships because other people don't want to be around them because they stink, those are huge opportunities for human connection missed. So working with people on good hygiene practice, going to the store with them to pick soaps that with nice scents, and doing everything possible to really encourage making hygiene fun and important is really huge. And reiterating again, appropriate dress for different contexts, right? So knowing that plumber's bum is not really a thing we want to have happening at work, and that we need to wear a belt and have our pants, tightly secured. That's really important. The other piece is around body language. So helping people understand that if they go to the Just for Fun dance and they stand in the corner with their arms crossed looking down the whole time, they're sending a message to everyone that they don't want to interact, right? But when they stand tall and open, when they make eye contact with people, when they approach people, they look much more friendly and approachable, and people will be more likely to speak to them. So letting them know that we send messages with our bodies, and really great ways to teach this are around charades. Emotional charades is a really great one you can look up. And we just did a lot of role modeling around body language so people could kind of see and feel that difference, right? All right. Checking in one more time. Hopefully it's all A-okay. Let me know if you've got any questions. If we're just kind of rolling along here. The next piece is likable people have interests and passions, right? This kind of relates back to authenticity. Likable people are unique. Likable people have things that they love that they want to share and talk about. They need to learn how to not always share and talk about that stuff at the expense of other people, and they need to learn how to connect with other people's, interests and passions. But folks are more interesting when they have things that they like to talk about. So how do we nurture interests and passions in our clients? How do we see the things that they're gravitating towards? How do we help them to develop an area of expertise and knowledge about something? And how do we help them to engage other people in these topics in a really meaningful way. I work with one client who just super loves sci-fi everything, and this person loves to tell me all about the latest movies they're watching, the latest books they're reading, and it's really great. And the big thing that this person hasn't learned is how to kind of turn, take, and you know, allow me to engage meaningfully in the discussion, as well as ask me about my favorite things or ask me what I think about the stuff that they're sharing with me. So interests and passions are really important. Next piece, responsibility, aka apology. This is definitely a really challenging one, especially if we're working with folks who really struggle with perspective taking and the ability to even acknowledge that they did something wrong or that they hurt someone else's feelings. This is where role modeling is really huge, and where if we're actually working with someone through a friendship that might be falling apart, supporting that person through thinking about whether an apology is appropriate and needed, and figuring out how to do it, role modeling it together, practicing it together, and supporting them through going through that process is really important. Responsibility is huge in all of our personal relationships, and if we can't be accountable for our actions and kind of understand where we've let people down, we can really struggle in our friendships. So that's really key. All right, a few more. We're almost there. Assertion. And assertion, again, to me, kind of relates back to that authenticity piece. It's about being able to state a choice and a preference. I often find with my clients that when I ask them, what they like most about their friends, well, this is not quite related to assertion. This is more the self-interest piece. When I ask them what they like most about their friends, they're not generally able to list like qualities about that other person. It's more like relational stuff or like how it makes them feel. But also that folks are really keen to kind of follow along with what others are doing, without necessarily thinking about like what they want to do. And so assertion skills is really about choice, demonstrating our ability for choice and our desire for choice in respectful ways. And it relates back to the next skill, which is negotiation. So how we can teach assertion and work with folks around assertion is making sure that we are giving people opportunities to voice their choices in their life. Now, as a staff person and a family member, we have to make sure we're not giving people false choice. So when we say, if I even think about like parenting my 6-year-old, if I say like, do you want an apple or do you want a cookie? A cookie has to be a legitimate option. He has to be allowed to choose that option. If it's not an actual option, I shouldn't be offering it. If I'm not okay with him choosing the cookie, I shouldn't be offering it. Because then I'm setting him up for a place where he asks for the cookie and then I say, oh no, you can't have it. And therefore I deny his choice or his assertion. So making sure that we give people meaningful choices in as many different ways as we can, even if it's like, are we going to leave in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Or what do you want to eat today? What do you want to wear today? What do you want to do today? That kind of stuff. And always making sure that the options that we offer are legitimate options the person can choose, so that we can role model that this person can make a choice, that we won't judge that choice, that we won't downplay that choice. So if they want to watch, like Winnie the Pooh or something, we don't go, oh, why do you want to watch that? So we celebrate their voice and their choice, and that they feel like their yes or that their choice matters, essentially. Because it does, and it's an important skill in friendship to be able to voice what you would like to do. This is also very much a vulnerability protection skill. So when people are more connected to what they want, they're less likely to be gullible or less likely to be going along always with what other people say, because they have assertion skills. And the next piece really related to that is negotiation skills. So knowing that you're not always going to get what you want, that your choice may not always be the one that's picked. And so if you're talking with a friend and I want to go for pizza and you want to go for Chinese, how do we negotiate that? So this can be a really fun one when we're when we're staff or family members, because we can play negotiation games. It's great if many of them can be kind of like positively oriented, so negotiation doesn't always have to feel like this heavy negative thing. And just demonstrating really 3 areas, which are communicating, so being able to voice what we want, being able to listen to what the other person wants, and then being able to problem solve together so that maybe we can find a win-win. Maybe we go for pizza today and Chinese next time, or maybe we order takeout and we both get what we want, or maybe, you know what, it's okay, I'll go for Chinese with you today. That's totally fine. Now I'm absolutely craving Chinese for lunch. Our last 3 skills, sharing, and this actually I alluded to more in the beginning, is more about sharing like time and attention than it is about sharing things. So, like I was saying, people can sort of get to a point where if it's not about them, they don't care. I work with my stepson who's on the spectrum. Sometimes we talk about, he'll be like, I want to do this thing. I want to do this thing with my time, but my friend wants to do that. And it's like, okay, well, you have a choice. You can do this thing alone, or you can decide to give it up and do this thing that your friend wants to do. And there can often be a response there of like, well, I don't care. I'm just going to do my own thing. But if we make that choice too often, we can end up in a lonely and isolated place. So this relates back to turn-taking in conversation, negotiation for how we're spending our time, what we're doing, and showing people that kind of reciprocity in conversation is all that's really about. Manners, pretty basic. Pleases and thank yous, holding doors, those kinds of things, being considerate, letting our friend order first, offering things to people. And the last one's kind of special one, is just humor, right? So having a sense of humor is a really great way to communicate with friends and to make friends and to break the ice. So working with humor with people and like nurturing their sense of humor can be really, really important. All right. Any questions about that so far? Like what's kind of resonating or coming across for you is what I'm most curious about. You can leave some notes in the chat. Really, in summary, what I want folks to kind of take away from today's workshop is that friendship matters to our health and well-being. It's actually really critical to our health and well-being. And so it's worthy of our time and attention. And depending on the role we have in working with clients, it may be a big part of our role or just a small part of our role to support them in this. The other piece to remember, and this is more specific to like paid staff, is that our job is not to be a person's friend. And I talk about this more in the ethics of touch. It's to support them in building friendships. It's to enable that friendship creation. It's not to kind of be that placeholder for those intimacy needs. And often that's why we see things like the inappropriate hugs or crushes, is because really it's fairly reasonable for an individual to have a crush or a connection with one of the few people that are age-appropriate adults in their life that they spend time with on a regular basis. And so if they're not spending time with other people, if they don't have other outlets or opportunities for that need to be met, then they're going to be seeking it from us. People must have both the skills for friendship and the opportunity to use them. So the skills that we talked about today need to be taught. They need to be worked on, and then people need to actually have opportunities to practice them, to fail and get better, right? And those are kind of the opportunities that many people with disabilities don't often get. Likability is a teachable set of skills, so we must teach them. I think pretty much the most common thing here was role model, and really provide opportunities for overt teaching around these skills. And the last 2 pieces I really want to leave folks with is like be honest and don't buffer people from rejection and disappointment, because these are great teaching skills. So Dave shares one story in his handout about a young woman who asked a guy out, and he turned her down, and he told her that she was stinky, and that's why he didn't want to go. And, this person had known hygiene challenges. She didn't like to shower. And, the staff, I think, felt bad for her. And so in trying to protect her, they, said he was a mean guy and all this stuff. But he wasn't incorrect. And it was such a lost opportunity to gently and kindly sit with her and be like, oh, okay, so this person kind of thinks you smell. And like, maybe he didn't say it very nicely, but he's not incorrect. And like, if you want to have a boyfriend, if you want to go out with somebody, if you want to make friends, maybe that's something that we can work on. So we often end up kind of like buffering people from those disappointing situations, but that can be at their detriment in the sense that they don't get it as a learning opportunity then, right? And the last piece is that friendship in a full social life can be achieved many different ways. So my social life looks one way, and the social life of a person with an intellectual disability may look very different. And we do want to make sure that folks have like genuine relationships in their lives. We want to ensure that they've got friendships with people who like do care about them beyond paid staff. But we also want to remember that like acceptance in the community and like a high number of social interactions in a day is also really important. So we might have a client or family member where, our greatest hope is that they've got a gaggle of girlfriends just like we did in high school, and they have sleepovers and hang out regularly, and they're just like the best of friends. And that may be something that's possible for our client or family member and like totally doable. And it may just not be the direction that their friendship life goes. But instead, they may be somebody who's like well known within the community. Everybody knows them. Their parents and family have done a really great job of introducing them to many people and giving them a sense of connection and support, that people are looking out for them. They know someone everywhere they go. And that in and of itself is full and whole and can really provide somebody with the skills to avoid some of those big loneliness impacts that we can kind of see. So that's all I really have to say for today. We have about 10 minutes left for Q&A if anybody wants to talk about anything or ask anything. There's so many different ways to teach all of this specific stuff. Again, the ethics of touch is a great webinar to start with. But just getting creative around like, how can I teach somebody how to be thoughtful? How can I teach someone how to perspective take? Just breaking down these tasks is a really great way to go. And reaching out to behavioral supports or to me or others at YACL to figure out like how to do that is really important. And I encourage everyone who watches this, whether you're a parent or a brother, caregiver, a frontline staff person, to think about how many, unpaid supports, unpaid stars are in the night sky of the person that you care for. And what can you do to support them to get more? Is it an opportunities piece that's lacking, or is it a skills piece that's lacking, or is it both? And for some of us, we may need to think about the role of our agency and how far we go in supporting that or just referring that support out. And for others, it might be just really thinking about how big or small the world of our person is, and maybe there are ways that we have limited it, that we could open it up. The other piece that I haven't really mentioned here, which is huge, is that all of this stuff is very much also about violence prevention. So we can have a tendency to feel like the smaller and more controlled we make someone's world, the more protected they will be. And it's often quite the opposite. The more people know others, the more people know them, the more people are looking out for them, the more self-esteem they have, the more socially accepted they feel, which means they don't need to access dangerous situations in order to feel loved or accepted because they're feeling loved and accepted on a regular basis. The more they can recognize what a positive friendship looks like, and the more positive friendships they have, then they don't need to rely on negative friendships as, it's the only person that I have in my life that cares about me, so I'm going to hold on to it, because they have other options, right? So full social lives are really important health measures, mental health measures, and very much violence prevention measures, which is kind of what I wanted to say. So if there aren't any questions, this is how you get a hold of me. You can check out the website, hsucon.com. If you go to the webinars and training page, that's where all the other webinar videos are. You can give me a shout, send me an email anytime if you've got an inquiry about this, a specific situation that you'd like to chat about. And otherwise, we will call it a day. And I will see everybody next time, May 30th. Actually, we had to bump up our last webinar to May 30th, where we'll be talking about many similar things, but in the context of dating and how we support inquiries about dating from our clients and family members. Every situation is unique and different, so how do we kind of approach that? All right, we'll see you next time.